In this lecture, we will create a storage account in Azure Portal, so let's switch over and get started. So in order to start, let's use the top search bar and search for storage accounts. And it's the first option, so let's select it. And currently I see that already I have a storage account, and this one is related to our Azure Cloud Shell machine. As you can see here, the resource group is Cloud Shell Storage, and then my region that I'm working in, West Europe. So this storage account was created automatically when we first started Azure Cloud Shell earlier in the course. Alright, but now let's manually create a new one, so I will select Add at the top. First I need to select a resource group, and I will use the course resource group AZ900RG. Next we need to define the storage account name, and this has to be globally unique. So for example, if I choose AZ900, I see that the storage account name is already taken. So if you go through this lab, please make sure that you choose one that's not taken, otherwise you won't be able to move on to proceed. So I will try AZ900 and then Training Bootcamp. You can add some random numbers at the end in order to make the name globally unique now. So it looks like this name is available. I have the green tick at the end. And I will deploy next my storage account in West Europe Azure region, so this is fine. And now I need to select between standard or premium performance for my storage. This option decides actually the type of disks used to store your data in the storage account. And if you choose the standard option, well, traditional magnetic hard disks will be used, while if you select premium, the data will be stored using SSD disks. For this demonstration, standard is fine. Let's move on now to account kind. And the default option here is standard v2 general purpose version 2. I can select between these three options, storage v2, storage and blob storage, but Microsoft recommends for any new storage account created to use storage v2. And maybe you're wondering why is that? Well, this option provides access to the latest and greatest features and pricing. For example, with general purpose version 1 or with blob storage, you don't have zone redundant storage or geo-redundant storage, and also they don't support all storage types. So I will keep the default option storage version 2, and last we need to choose between the different storage replication options. As I've mentioned in the previous lecture, I can now select one of the 6 available options: LRS, zone redundant storage, geo-redundant storage, and so on. Let's keep the default option, locally redundant storage, which means our data will be replicated 3 times in the same availability zone, and we will now continue to networking. Taking a look from the top, we first need to select the connectivity method. Well, I want the connectivity method for my storage account to be public because I want to be able to access data in my storage account from anywhere, no matter my IP address. I can include some restrictions here and select public endpoint if I need to allow access to my storage account from specific virtual networks defined in Azure, for example my AZ900 VNet virtual network. Or I can create a private endpoint for restricted private access. We will perform multiple tasks throughout this module using this storage account, so let's keep the default public endpoint selected and now move on to data protection. For now, let's keep the defaults here and move on to advanced. And I see that the first option, secure transfer required, is enabled by default, which means that I only accept HTTPS secure communication with my storage account. Allow blob public access, it's enabled, and this is good as we want to do some testing as we progress in this module. And here is the blob access tier. And by default, when creating a new storage account, hot access tier is selected. Archive tier is not available in this configuration window, but it can be later on accessed and used after the account is created. Data Lake Storage Generation 2, well, that's for big data and it doesn't apply to this hands-on lab. And the last option, Azure Files, well, I could enable here this option, and this would mean to allow moving files of up to 100 terabytes, but it's not needed in our case. Finally, let's add some tags, and first tag is name, and the value will be AZ900-storage account, and the second one cost center, and let's define a new value, for example, development. Final step, let's move on to review and create, and then simply create the storage account. The setup shouldn't take more than a minute, so now let's wait. So our account is ready, let's go to resource now. And the overview page of my storage account is being displayed. Taking a look at the top information, I can see the status is primary available and also the location, West Europe. Moving on to the right, performance is standard and the access tier is hot. I'm also using LRS locally redundant storage replication and a Storage V2 general purpose version 2 storage account type, which is the recommended option. So once the storage account is created, we can start working with the different Azure storage services. So now I have here containers, file shares, tables and queues. In the next lecture, we will create our first container and upload some data to Azure Storage. Thank you, and I will see you in the next lecture.